morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, everyone. Whatever time you're listening to or watching this, we do hope you have had or are having a wonderful day. And if not, hopefully we can make that a little bit better. For those who do not know me, my name is Jarrell.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa.
And let's just talk for a little bit, yeah?
Yeah, let's just talk.
Friend.
You're going to like this one. This one's going to be good. We're going to get so many good taglines. The end of this, for our Patreons out there, you're going to love the video that comes after this because we're going to have to pick a title for this. And at the end, it's going to be a long ass list. I can tell you right now. It's
Oh,
going to be a good
shit.
ass time. This is going to be a good one.
What we got?
Well, let's just talk about sex. A little
For-
bit of all of it, okay? So, like, the original kind of topic that we spatball at each other was how do we talk about sex in that way that, like, because children have to find out what sex is, right?
oh,
So,
shit,
at
yeah.
what age is it appropriate? And then what conversations at what age? Like, how do we progress through this? Or do they do it just like my parents did it, which was here's a book about how your body's built, have fun. So, like,
That, uh,
how do we talk about sex? And I'm happy with any context. I mean, the original idea was like, how do we talk about sex with kids? But also, how do we talk about sex in our relationships? How do we talk about sex with our parents? How do we talk about sex with people at work? Do we do that? Like, how do
okay.
we talk about, let's talk about sex?
First and foremost, I don't appreciate you saying that I'm gonna enjoy this topic because you just made me sound like a horn dog, which may or may not be accurate, but I don't appreciate the attack. Anyhow,
I think you're going to enjoy it because we're going to get a lot of laughs out of it. That was
oh, okay, yeah, sure,
that was my intent.
yeah, okay, whatever. I don't know.
30% of it, anyway.
Trash. I see whatever's in that glass is getting to you today. Okay. Anyhow, Um, wow, that's gonna be a fun slash rough one. Right now, I think I'll stick with the kids, because interestingly enough, I just saw a video about a story where this teacher and her husband, who was a cop, um, the husband just got sentenced to jail for 100 years because
Wow.
they fed cupcakes with sperm in them to her students,
Oh
in
my
addition
God.
to 150 counts of child corn and rape that happened in, oh, I'm sorry, grape that happened in their place that the wife apparently also helped slash recorded in. So
Wow.
we'll stick with the how do you introduce this, or when or should you introduce this to kids?
Okay. Yeah. Well, because we're touching on a lot of important stuff with that one. So I will say first of all, for our listeners, neither of us are parents.
Facts.
I have zero intentions of ever becoming a parent. I don't know what to do with children. It's not that I dislike that they exist. It's just that it's a bit like handing me a rocket launcher and saying, "Go have fun."
No,
Um,
no, no. You said
so
it pees and it screams.
it's true. It pees and it screams, and it will never appreciate what you did for it. So, which I know as an adult that I peed and I screamed, and I still to this day, there's no way I could appreciate everything that my parents did for me, and I had a beautiful childhood. So, like, understand, it's not like I'm broken or something. I just not really drawn to the whole parenting thing. So that's our grain of salt on this conversation is that neither of us are parents. Neither of us actually has children of any age. Um,
Facts. Big facts.
so that's our grain of salt on this. However, that being said, and this will be a deeper conversation. This is a topic for another day, actually, parenting between the two of us. It's a very interesting conversation. Um,
Hmm.
I am of the opinion that this thing spits out, you hold it, it's tiny. It doesn't have the understanding, it doesn't have the skills, it doesn't have the context, but it is a whole person.
Okay.
That's a human. And that human with all the luck and nurturing and needs, will one day become somebody like you and I that can hold this kind of conversation as an adult. It's that awareness of you and I, as intelligent, as well spoken, as funny or not as we are, we started that way,
Right.
right? So you have to recognize this tiny bundle of joy, if that's what it is, will become a whole person and has to be treated as a whole person.
Sure.
It's not an object, it's not a doll. You don't play dress up, they don't have the ability to tell you they do or don't consent with something because they don't understand what consent is and because they don't have the language to tell you.
Okay.
So, like, those are things that are still owed to it. So, a child, even in the position of not being able to communicate needs or desires, still deserves the level of respect that an adult human being deserves.
Sure.
Not any less worthy of respect. And so that changes the way that you interact with a child. Because if you see them as like a hierarchy and like they're lower than you, that interaction changes, which is why we end up with a lot of these abusive situations where like a kid doesn't know that there's something going on here that isn't okay. They just know they don't like it or that it confuses them. Right. And they have no higher understanding to be able to consent or not consent, which is why we have laws against child sex and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
is because they don't have the capability. They deserve the respect of, but they don't have the capability to choose. So I'm still really shook by that news article. I had not heard that, and that's really upsetting. But
My bad. Sorry, I didn't mean to shake you. That.
no, it sets the tone on this because it is a big topic and it's easy to laugh at, and we will. But
Yeah, we will.
we will. We're not going to lie to anyone here. We're going to laugh at this. It's
Another grain
laugh
of
or
salt and
cry.
another
So
forethought. I am a terrible human being. No, I'm not. I'm perfect. I will laugh. No, I'm kidding. I'm definitely gonna laugh, but I don't think I'm a terrible human being. But there will be moments, especially down the line in this podcast, where um, there will be moments where we need to laugh, just so we don't get bogged down into how heavy and how dark and how weird life can get. Um,
yeah,
so that said, if this is a topic, um, and we'll try to keep it light, but if this is a topic that you don't want to hear or you think that you'd like to tune out on this one, by all means, please do. And hopefully we'll catch you on the next one. But if you want to stick around and, have this talk with us, we do encourage that as well.
yeah. So the perspective has to come from, for me, as a not parent. When we communicate with kids, we're teaching them always.
Okay.
100% always. When we communicate with kids, they're learning something, whether we want them to learn that thing or not, which is why you go to the grocery store and they point at a block of cheese and instead of saying cheese, they say shit. It's
What?
this is I
Wait, what kid is pointing at cheese and saying shit?
there was a story. It must have been a Reddit story or something on the internet. Well, it's that thing where like a kid watches like mom pulls the cheese block out of the fridge and then drops it and says shit, and so the kid associates cheese with shit, right?
Okay,
So like
there it is.
it's that kind of thing where like you don't intend it, but kids are fucking smart, right? Like they pick up on shit, like they connect those two fucking dots. And that goes for, I think kids, we don't give them enough credit. I think they become aware of sex a lot sooner than, at least in the United States, we give them credit for. Depending on what their situation is. So like I was a really raised sheltered Catholic kind of child. I remember very distinctly the moment where I stood in church and realized that all the people around me were married couples with children, which meant that all of them fuck. Like, I really remember that moment. Like, it was just a wild, sex was not something that really came into the picture for me. But I had a friend who had experienced trauma as a child, sexual trauma as a child. And so it was necessary to teach. And I didn't understand. I didn't know what had happened to them. But I knew that an understanding of what sex was something that happened in that household and didn't happen in mine.
Right.
And it becomes this thing of like, kids are smarter than you give them credit for. And the ways we teach them about sex, the actual D and the P action, starts way lower than that. So I'm a
So
linguist. Sorry, you go ahead.
no, well, you brought up something that I was going to use as sort of pivotal to my point.
Mm,
You brought up like when kids are or and how they're exposed to it, right? Because my
hmm.
initial point was going to be, um, it depends on when they have access to such a thing. Like
Right.
I remember, like after I graduated high school, or like I was in the military at this point, and I'm learning that kids are in, even when I was in high school, I'm like, kids are in middle school doing this shit behind the locker, behind like the bleachers and stuff. And I'm
Yep.
like, when I was in middle school, it wasn't even like really a thought for real. Or like kids that are
Hmm.
even in the fourth and fifth grade. I'm like, whoa, wait a
Hmm.
minute. So it's sort of one of those weird ball games where you can't say a random age. Okay, hey, at the age of 16 or 15, it's appropriate to start talking then, because
Right.
God forbid, someone like your friend or a lot of the women that are in my life who have had a traumatic experience, or even the guys who've had a traumatic experience
Hmm.
earlier, then you sort of got to have that conversation then. Um,
Hmm.
that's a weird one because I don't know if there's a certain age or time frame. In an ideal scenario, I would like to say 15, 16, 17.
Puberty,
Yep,
right?
right around that mark there where
Hmm.
maybe you've touched yourself, maybe you've not, or maybe you're just having these weird feelings and you're like, yo, I think I kind of something got warm, or
Right.
why am I waking up like this? Like,
Right.
I
Right.
would like to think then, but it's such a weird thing now. And then once again, there's the internet, and that's a whole nother shit show in and of itself.
It
Where
is.
you
It
got a kid
is.
who's 8 years old with an iPhone. They ain't no telling what they done seen, or
They
even
can
they
find
haven't seen
anything. Right.
big facts, or even let's say you're an adult who you're a lot more responsible. You're a lot more conservative with what you allow your kid to have access to. What
Mm,
about their classmates? But
right.
now they're learning stuff from their classmates. Dude, this is a weird topic, especially like, so me, I do like the idea of having a little meat bag one day. Um yes, I refer to them as meat bags. um and so for me, this is something that I'm thinking about a lot, especially with what you see going on in the news and media and stuff like that, where it's like, how do I effectively and safely allow a kid that time to be innocent and just to be a
Hmm.
fucking kid. Don't worry about nothing. Just go be a
Yeah.
kid. Go play in dirt. Go fall off some shit. You'll be all right tomorrow.
Right.
But then still let them know the kind of world that you're going to exist in.
Right.
Um, yeah, I
Right.
I don't I don't really know if there is an age or how to even go about that conversation.
And this is where we take into account how old the child is, right? So I'm a
Mhm.
linguist. And one of the things we study is the difference between how grown adults learn a second language as opposed to how children learn a language, right?
Okay.
And one of the things that they start with, and it feels so stupid, you're sitting there in class learning this from your professor out of a textbook, and they tell you that language education starts when you hold that child and you make a noise and they make a noise back.
Hmm.
And then you make a noise and they make a noise back. What you're doing, and it's so ridiculous, right? It's just an infant. It's just reacting to, I mean, it may as well be like an animal, right? For the amount that it knows to understand.
Right.
But it has the capability to learn from this interaction. What is it learning from this interaction? Turn taking. So, as an infant, the only
Okay.
thing that that tiny infant brain has space for to learn from language and how you use language, and between mom and dad or mom and mom or whoever, is they observe this thing called turn taking, and then they take part in it. And like
Mm.
that's building block one, right? So it starts that small,
That is so
right?
dope.
So,
That
like
is so
at
dope.
the end of the line, you end up with you and I having complex ideas where we have thousands, tens of thousands of word, large vocabularies, and we can produce just a myriad of sounds. We have the capability to learn other languages,
I don't
to
know if my
distinguish.
vocabulary is that big, but go ahead.
It is, trust me. Um, but a baby, all they have space for is learning turn taking, eye
Mhm.
contact, right? Where they
Mhm.
learn that, oh, this is a conversation between you and I.
That is
And there's
so
no
dope.
content here, there's no meaning here, but we start real small, right? And so that's just learning language.
That is
But when it
crazy.
comes to, yeah. I
Well,
mean,
like that I'm sorry, that reminds me of this video I see, like, it's this dude and his kid sitting on the couch. It sounds like they're watching football or something, but the baby can't
yeah.
talk at all, but it's having a full on, like, in-depth,
I did
energetic
it. Maybe I
conversation.
watched
You know,
it.
it's like, "Yeah, man, that's what I'm trying. I don't know why he did that." And the baby's like, "Da, da, 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 da." Like, it is the most
Yeah,
real conversation,
yeah.
but nothing's being said.
And it's beautiful
Yeah,
language
yeah.
education, right?
It's
As a
yeah.
linguist, I love hearing that. When your baby babbles at you, they're that young, they don't have words, they don't have sentences, they don't have any of those structures yet. All they know is that you make a ton of noises and you sound excited and you're involved. That means I get to make a ton of noises when it's my turn and sound really excited, right? So there's learning
Yeah,
here. And because they continue to do this thing back and forth, he's reinforcing the learning,
yeah.
right? So now we're encouraging this is a child who, opposed to a child who maybe doesn't have this type of experience, this is a child who's more likely to enthusiastically engage in a conversation
Mhm,
because
mhm.
they've experienced it in its small little itty bitty part. And I really feel like this is something that's really allegorical, great metaphor for how we teach our kids about sex.
Alright, talk to me.
Because one of the most important things, one of the most fundamental things about sex is consent.
Okay.
And consent is definitely something that a child can understand. It's why we explain it with these silly metaphors like, oh, it's as easy as tea. You know, if your friend came over and they asked for a cup of tea and then they fell asleep, you wouldn't pour the tea down their throat while they're sleeping. You know, a
Right.
kid is like, well, fuck no, like you're asleep. Like that's dumb.
Yeah.
And they don't realize, you know, it may not necessarily be connected yet to this idea of sex because maybe they don't have the larger concept of it yet, but they
Right.
can understand how we teach this idea of consent. And it's something that a lot of people may not like. So, like, grandparents have a hard time with this. So, I have a
Mm.
really distinct memory. I was around 8 or 9, and we went to go visit my father's family, and his brother, to put it flatly, he's an alcoholic.
Okay.
And so he's difficult to be around. And he, as a 9-year-old child, smelled like cigarette smoke, which I didn't grow up with.
Mm.
And
Okay.
was just kind of a really intimidating, strangely acting figure. You know,
Right.
I didn't have a huge understanding of what was going on, but I knew that I did not want to hug this person. He
Right.
smelled bad and he made me uncomfortable.
Right.
But I was in a situation where, no, that's your uncle, that's family, you love him, you should give him a hug. And I wasn't
Right.
let out of that. I was forced into a position of having to hug him.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's a bad person. And as an adult, it's a different relationship. I get that. But it is important when your kids are little. I mean, even younger than me at 9, when they're little, you know, if you have a really energetic baby that you and I saw it in the back of planes, you have that really personable baby who just like
Yeah.
plays past the baby. You know, they're just reaching for anyone who's reaching too. And the next
Yeah.
thing you know, the baby's in everybody's hands in the back row. Like, those babies are learning that, like, I can want something
Mhm.
and then I can get it. And then
Right.
they swerve toward me, right? They like start the reach toward me. And then they get a read of my vibes and they like backpedal on that shit, right? I've had it happen more times than like I wish I was making this up. But like I don't, and it's not even like I put out, it's just this like
Yes, you do.
I make myself scarce. I make myself scarce.
You
I'm in the
are
back
you
alley. It's
are
like,
a
oh,
very
baby's gonna look at me. I'm gonna go.
you
Like I don't.
you're a strong member of the FDK committee. Fuck them kids. Uh, um,
I'm not. It's not a child's fault that I don't like them, and I refuse to be the
I,
grown
I
up that
I'm not
ruins grown ups for kids.
I'm
But
not saying that it's your fault. I'm just saying, even though I'm
with
also a
babies,
part of that committee, babies love me, and I don't know why. Like, like
they
the amount
read
of
my
times
vibes, man. They read my vibes.
they're like,
They go
"Oh, she
right
don't
for
want
it,
one
and
of
they
us."
oh,
Fuck
oh,
that
she not
lady.
about this. Well, and it's especially the really little ones. The smaller they are, the more terrified I am. That's the rule. Um, fragile and breakable, and I don't want to. That's too much.
I'm
That's a
not
whole
gonna lie.
person, and I
I
could break it. So I'm gonna
with
pass.
with with with
Like,
with my nieces and nephews, it took me forever to want to hold them. I was like, "Yo, this little
mm-mm.
thing might break," and then all of a sudden, you see like my mom, who's had however many kids, and like just yank them and
One
grab them, let them
arm.
move, and I'm just like, "Wait a
Yeah.
minute, like this
And that
little meat
whole
bag gonna
time.
break. Hold on, like." Like I don't, what do I do here? No, dude, there have been a couple
But
times where I'd inhale people's kids on planes. Like, no, there was one kid. We were flying from like Chicago back into Boise, and this little thing would not stop crying.
Oh God.
And mama back there trying to appease it and reason with it. I know that I said it's a meat bag. It's like
I don't remember male or female. Move on. Like,
and eventually I get the kid and I'm holding it
right.
and it immediately stops crying. I walk around with it. I'm just sitting there
Is
chilling.
it bad? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject, but you said I hold it and it suddenly calms down. The thing in the back of my head is, oh fuck.
Wait, what?
It's all fuck because now I'm the one who has to be responsible because I'm the one who quieted it down.
Which
so it's
now?
not just let me interact. It's now like I'm responsible for this thing so that the rest of the fucking airplane can sleep. I did not sign up for this.
Which, funny enough, I gave it back to it. Well, mom was like, how did you do that? In my brain, I was like, "Cause this little shit. No, I'm not finna tolerate it and reason with it like you. I'm not about this crying shit. You ain't got no reason to
You
cry.
gonna go to sleep.
Hey, you crying for? Be quiet." And sure as shit, I gave the kid back to its mom, and about 20 seconds in, lost its shit all over again. And I was like, "I'm not holding this thing again. You better figure out how to manage your baby." But yeah. So I guess in a way, I was responsible, and I'm pretty sure a lot of passengers are like, "Oh, stop crying. Oh, this man is an angel. Fuck this dude."
He did not maintain the peace.
Because it was definitely a night flight. It was definitely nighttime. Everybody was trying to go to sleep. Yeah, I was definitely a piece of shit that day. I was horrible that day.
I got called for 2 trips in December. And that was, I don't remember which one, but that was the first time I've actually held somebody's child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I made it almost 6 years without actually being handed an infant at work. By the way, listeners, I understand that traveling with a child is difficult, and it's especially difficult if you are traveling on your own. But the likelihood is that the aircraft that you are on is large enough to have 2 flight attendants on it, which means that the likelihood is if you do run into a flight attendant who seems resistant, that the other flight attendant will be more than happy to take your baby. Please don't just find the other flight attendant. It'll be okay.
You sound so traumatized and upset right now.
Like, of course it was fine. And all of the parents listening to this are going to be like, y'all are making a big deal out of fucking nothing. And you're right. I am. Like, it's fine. Like, the child was fine and I was fine. But it was like that Nathan Pyle fucking cartoon that he did, the aliens out of this world or whatever it is, where it's aliens who are living life and then he makes it sound funny.
I got a couple of shirts, actually.
Yeah, so he has one that's about like a friend coming over to visit after they have a baby and mom passes over the baby and he's like, I don't want the baby. And by the last panel, the baby is like beginning to be upset and is beginning to cry. And the other alien just says something to the extent of the discomfort increases. Which I super relate to because it's mutual, right? Our mutual discomfort increases. So by recognizing that, like, I, as an adult human being, am not comfortable with this situation, this tiny human being who has the right to say yes or no in the only words it knows, which is scream or quiet, should consent or not consent to something. Like, the mutual discomfort increases. Like, both of us are not happy with this situation, right? Please just respect that. However, and we'll talk about this on the parenting episode. That being said, it can't be unreasonable, right? So if you're in a situation and your 2-year-old has learned that they don't have to hug people they don't want to hug, and grandma really wants the fucking hug, it's okay to tell grandma, no, I need to teach this kid that it has authority over its own body.
Which is interesting.
And as they get older, and as that relationship grows, they're allowed to change the way that they interact with you, of course. Just like me as an adult can. That's fine. I'm not going to force you into a situation, especially a situation that's about your body, right? I want to teach you that you have control over the people that touch you.
That's fair. That's very fair.
However,
go ahead.
I say this, back it up with, I have a friend from high school who had a child. He was probably somewhere around 3 or 4 years old, and he refused to get a haircut. He didn't, well, she refused to take him in for a haircut because they'd gone for a haircut before and the buzz of the clippers had scared him, which is common. Okay. And so she refused to go in and take him for a haircut because he didn't like that experience. He reacted negatively and
Right.
he didn't want to be there. That being said, nobody says what the haircut has to be, but you do have to teach your kid that a haircut is an important part of your hygiene and health. I don't care what it's cut as, but they need to learn that there are some things we do in life that suck, that we don't like, that we do anyway because they keep us healthy.
That was gonna be my
Right?
point. Like
So,
even outside of health, like just for the sake of getting along, or that one's sketchy. Let me say, for the sake of getting the job done, right? For the sake of, you know, coexisting peacefully. There are
right,
many things that I don't want to do, didn't want to do, that I've done just so we can keep the peace. We're fine. It's not going to kill me. It's not the end of the world.
right,
It's fine. I'll get over it.
right, right,
So then, how do you go about teaching and delineating between the two? Like, in one hand, you're
right.
saying, like, 'cause I know for me, it wasn't an option to not hug whatever family
No,
member wanted to hug me. Like, okay,
me
go hug
either.
them. And it's a
Yep.
thing, like, and like, whether or not I wanted to, it didn't matter, didn't make a fucking difference. But it also, at least I don't think it was something that stuck with me as I got older. It was like, yeah, that's
Right.
grandma, that's auntie, that's uncle, that's Uncle Marvin, or that's whoever. You know, it is what
Hmm.
it is. It's family.
Right.
Fine, I'll hug them, and then we'll leave right
So,
after. We're good.
and the lesson there is, as an adult, if you walked into a family reunion, like it was a surprise, you wouldn't go home to visit your mom, and then your entire family is there. You learned from this, as I did, I'm assuming, verifying here,
Hmm?
that that's what you do. It's family. Maybe you don't remember their middle name, but this is family, and they get a hug.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, and you can teach that thing without causing it to be a forced relationship, because the lesson that you get from being forced to hug somebody you don't want to hug is that people in a position of power or in a position of authority or who are older than you
Mm.
have the right to touch you even if you don't like it, which
And see,
primes you which primes you for those kind of really horrible situations of abuse,
right?
right?
Yeah, that's
So
fair.
it's like there's
I can
that
see
little
that.
thing on it, but it's the same thing. It's like, well, kids see the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you want a kid to interact with you, right? This is what I learned. If you're on the plane, you want a kid to interact with you because you want them to feel relaxed. It's a or whatever. The best way to get especially a young child, to respond to you when you ask something like, "What is your name?" Well, I don't know you. I don't owe you anything. Why would I give you my name? If you start with, "Hi, my name's Marissa. What's your name?" They're more likely to give you their name. And you go, "Oh, guess what? I'm 28 years old. How old are you?" Well, I'm, right?
Mhm.
That's the response.
Wait,
They're much
wait.
more
Did
likely to give
did
the
you
response.
did you just give us your age?
I did. Yeah, I'm 28. Oh, whatever.
Hey, there we go. Because I got told to go fuck myself the last time I asked. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I gave it of my own consent, so it's fine.
That's cute. I like it.
Well, so the point I'm trying to get across here is that when you're in those sort of situations, like you're no longer adult 21-year-old Jarrell at your family reunion, you're now 4-year-old Jarrell at a family reunion. And you
Okay.
watch with your eyes and you watch mom hugs grandpa, mom hugs uncle, mom hugs auntie, right? And then dad, you know, special handshake with his brother or whatever it is. And you go, huh, okay. So these are people, they're choosing to interact, they're choosing to touch each of these
Okay.
people. And you go, okay, well, if it's safe for them to touch, then maybe it's safe for me to touch. And you're more likely. So you're learning from that interaction as well.
Sure.
So it's not like we're just taking a kid to the grocery store and then being like, hug a stranger, right?
Right. If anything, it
So
was
that's a bad lesson, right? We
we
don't
were
want to do
taught
that.
stranger danger. Like we were told, hey, you
Exactly.
don't know people, leave them alone, type of thing.
Right. Exactly. So the kid is learning, A, look at all these people around me that I trust and love, and they are doing this touch thing. That seems to be a normal thing that they're doing. And then it's
Mm,
their turn, and they go, maybe I'm not comfortable with touching this specific person, but I'll touch that person, that person, that person. Like that person might feel left out because they're not getting the hug from the 4-year-old. But at the same time, it's important, like we're adults, we can handle that, right?
yeah,
We
that's fair.
have the
Yeah, as an
capacity
adult, you
to
should
make
be able to.
space for, all right, as a child who's learning here, as an adult, you should have the capability to
Yeah,
do that. But as a kid, it's important that you learn that you get to choose and that your
yeah.
choices are okay. So,
Well,
like, this is step one, right? Of
mhm,
teaching kids about sex. And so, as they grow older and they learn things like sacrifice and they learn things like context, so
mhm,
as they get older and those things come around, you get to add a little bit more information that has a little bit more to do with sex, right?
yeah.
And the thing is, you have to know your kids. And then it reaches a point where it's like,
I think
well,
that, and
yeah,
you just added a whole nother layer to this, because one thing I was gonna say is that I don't, and maybe I was blessed enough, and favored enough by whatever powers may or may not be, to
hmm,
have not been in a situation where I had an adult that wanted to touch me inappropriately. Because I was gonna say, well, like, even though I was made to hug, whoever it was that wanted to hug me, like
hugger.
even the old random
I'm a
lady at
hugger.
church who kept
Yep.
who kept wanting to hug me and kiss me on my face and shit and all on my forehead
Oh,
and my cheeks, like the old lady at church. I still never. I feel like you just wrote that down. Um, I don't. I never felt like older people or people who are above me have power to touch me however they want it. Like I've never,
okay.
that one never clicked with me. It was like,
Hmm.
all right, mama made me do this. Fine, can we go get McDonald's now? Like it was that simple. Like, so for me,
Move on to the next thing.
and maybe that was a privilege or just a safety blanket that I was lucky enough to have in life, to where I didn't have to have that connection be made or not
Hmm.
made. I don't know, but
Hmm.
that was interesting. But then you just brought up a great point, as far as, like, we'll call it child temperament. Like, what
Hmm.
kind of kid do you got here? Like,
Right.
do you need to have this conversation now?
Right.
Are they in a situation where, are they in an environment where they need to have this conversation? And I guess I think if I were to try and answer the topic of this thing is, I don't think there is a one size fits all. I don't.
Absolutely not. Yeah. That's why
I,
we're
I guess.
talking about it.
Yeah, it's such a shit show though, because it was like even my temperament versus my brother's temperament. Like, there were
Hmm.
things that my mom. There were ways that my brothers needed my mom, and there was a way that I needed her.
Hmm.
And it didn't happen the way I needed it to, but it is what it is. I'm alive today. Our relationship is what it is. But
Hmm.
that's something that she's talked about, to her. She was like, you were always different as a kid. Like, with
Right.
your two brothers, they needed this. I didn't realize that you needed this thing more.
Right.
Um, and so it's once again, depending on your environment, like the school they go to, their classmates, God forbid, hell, now the teachers now. It's
God.
you don't know whether or not you need to have these conversations. Oh, question. Do you
Hmm.
think the teachers have any right, like, unless of course it's like a high school sex ed class, blah, blah.
Hmm.
Do you think that teachers have any right at all to talk to your kids about sex?
Um, that's tough.
Mm,
That's tough. So one of my best friends is an early age educator. So they work with first grade students.
mhm.
And they are actually pro teacher sex education.
Okay.
Um, and they sit there because of where I sit about this, which is there is age appropriate sex education to be done, right? So
Sure.
he's not, that person isn't educating or advocating for kindergarten teachers to be telling kids about anatomy, right? Like they're
Mhm.
not advocating for that kind of thing, but that, if that there needs to be a certain amount of presence, a certain amount of understanding among our public education teachers about how much is appropriate to talk about, because first grade, 6 year olds are of the position where they begin to notice things that are different, right?
Okay.
and this is something we're going to talk about a lot, things that are different. Kids notice. People notice. It's an inherent part of how we survived. It's lizard brain. Lizard brain just notices that shit is different. And so a kid is going to approach you and go, you know, so and so in this class has two daddies instead of a mommy and a daddy. Why?
Mm-hmm.
And whether you want to look at it as a sex question or not, it's a sex question.
Okay, I can
You
see
know,
that. I can see that. Yeah,
so
I
there
can see
has to
that
be a certain
definitely.
amount of, and that's like in an individual understanding, right? But there's a
Sure.
lot of legislation in place, and particularly the legislation in Florida that's been passed that doesn't allow for teachers in his position to be able to explain something like that. And it, maybe that's not the intent to inhibit a specific interaction between just teacher and child, but it's also an inhibition between like using a storybook that exhibits two mothers instead of a mother and father.
Okay.
So, like, does that storybook have something good to offer? Absolutely. The point of that
Sure.
story is not that they have two mommies, but now you can't read it because they happen to have two mommies in the story. And it's
Right.
like, okay, well, we're preventing, there's a certain amount of sex education here. Like, we have to accept it that what we want to call sex education and what actually involves sex education is so much larger. Just like we talk about linguistics, we want to talk about there's 5,000 different languages on the planet. Yeah, but language education starts with making eye contact and cooing in turn. Like, that's a part of your language education, and a part of your sex education is being able to approach people and ask questions
Yeah.
and being able to interact with the world as it sits and still allow for tolerance and understanding. So I do think that there is a place for a certain amount of freedom within our public classrooms for
Okay.
those kind of different sexuality expressions. I have a teacher, a middle school teacher, who was actually strictly forbidden. We would reach chapter 7, which was about sex,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was that really mechanical, like there's a penis and there's a vagina and these two things, and then there's sperm and then there's a uterus, and then like it's all that technical bullshit.
Right.
And then we would read that chapter, and then the rest of the class, we'd work on our questions at the end of the book or whatever, and she would tell us, look, I have this shoebox, I've cut a hole in it. If you have a question, whether you think it's dumb or stupid or useful, doesn't matter. Write a question on a piece of paper, put it on the box. And tomorrow, when we come back for class, all we'll talk about, the whole class, will just be questions that's in the box.
Okay. That's a
She got
healthy
fired for
idea.
this. She got
Wow.
fired for that. Because
Well,
in the state of Idaho, you're not allowed to talk about sex outside of the context of the mechanics of it.
okay.
So she provided a type of sex education the state of Idaho has determined isn't healthy for our kids. And I'm telling you, I remember so vividly, one of the questions was, can a plastic bag be used in place of a condom?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm
So,
sorry, but
yeah.
this is a type of sex education. I was in 7th grade,
Yeah.
so 15 years old. This is the type of sex education that our kids need to stay safe.
I
There reaches a
and on that
point
one there,
where
yeah, I would definitely
safety
agree.
becomes more important than morality.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would definitely agree with that one. Well, my question, one point I was going to make was, okay, well, let's say, um, let's go back to the mommy and mommy, or
I'm going to
daddy and
stir
daddy
my
thing.
cup somewhere where you can't hear me
Oh
stirring
no,
it.
I can definitely hear it. And one of these days, you won't do that to me, but it's fine. It's fine. No, you're not. Anyway, let's go back to the book that has the mommy and daddy.
Mm-hmm.
My question or my response was going to be, because I know a lot of people, whether or not they have kids right now, or a lot of parents, their response would be, okay, cool. Well, if my kid has a question about that, tell me that my kid has that question and let me talk to my child about that. Versus, why do you have to talk to my kid about that? Because then you also,
Yeah.
depending on what side of the line of the fence a teacher's on, then other
Mm-hmm.
shit gets involved, and then that's a whole other wormhole that we're not gonna go into
Mm-hmm.
today. um but there's that. But definitely, like, on something like that, like, can I use a grocery bag? That is, honest to God, a good fucking question to ask somebody. um I mean, now that I'm older, I know, but like
with a really
around,
distinct yes/no answer,
yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, don't do
right?
that. Yeah, that's gonna be a
Yeah,
no, my guy. Don't do that.
certainly fall on one side on this one, and
Yeah.
that's just
And
factual, scientific,
yeah,
actual
that is
response.
just, yeah, like, so for that to been a, granted, I don't know what the other questions were, and also once again, if the laws state that a teacher cannot talk about sex outside of the basic mechanics, then it is what it is. But it does suck that a space that was safe, because
Mhm.
I'm assuming no one's names was used. It's a
Nope.
random ass box. You can throw whatever your
Mhm.
questions is, so it sort of keeps the anonymity um, intact. um, it's unfortunate that that was a situation where that sort of happened, because this was a teacher that seemed like they were just trying to educate, not to influence, but to
Right.
educate,
They
and that's
valued
unfortunate.
their students' safety over their perception of morality.
Mm.
They found it more important that their kids were safe than that they were moral or sinning or whatever it is. And that's not an arrangement. I mean, there are plenty of people who feel that, well, if you don't even bring it into it, then all you have is morality. That's all that's left. And therefore you did the wrong thing because it was never about safety. It was about morality from the first place.
That's
Which
fair.
carry your arguments, right? That's I'm not gonna it's entirely valid. I don't feel like it's very realistic, but I do feel like it is a valid argument. You know, if we
Yeah,
focus on our kids' morality, then all we have to worry about is morality. So if that's where Idaho has decided to stand, that's where
yeah.
Idaho stands. But very much so. And that's why there's no good, clean answers on this kind of stuff because I know my friend who's a teacher if they were approached about something like that, would choose to send an email to the parents. It's just like,
Yeah,
hey,
hey, your kid said
your
this.
child asked today about this thing, and this is what I said in response. And
Yeah,
then you get the response that you get. I
yeah.
mean, but this person is also not straight, and they have had students removed from their class because they're not straight.
Now,
So, I
which
mean, they've.
then the way which then is a topic that I want to hit, and I don't know if we needed to do a whole episode on this, but I think we can briefly brush it a little bit. Um, Another question that I had when I brought up the idea of, like, is it okay for teachers to talk about sex? Is also part two.
Mhm.
Is it your students' business to know about your sex or romantic life? For me, growing up, it wasn't my fucking business
Right.
who my teachers were with, who they weren't
Hmm.
with, what they
Hmm.
did. Like, I remember when my kindergarten teacher, Miss Cotton, I had a crush on that lady. Oh, I had a crush on Miss Cotton.
Woo!
Oh, I had a crush on Miss Cotton. And then she showed up pregnant one day with her husband, and I was like, she cheated on me. Like, it was so bad. But that was the
Oh, I
thing.
love it. God, that's precious.
But and even like just outside of school, like if I was ever around like a family reunion, or like we went out to like a park somewhere, whatever it was,
Hmm.
my, my folks always told me, stay in a child's place. That's grown folks'
Yeah.
business. So it's
Mm,
not your business as a student to be trying to figure out what your teacher's love life looks like. And
mhm.
I would agree. It's also like, as the teacher, as the responsible adult, it is your responsibility to keep that child or student in that childlike or student place. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you want to have that connection, and you want to be a human. Like, I remember how
Right.
mind blowing it was when I found out teachers had a first name. It's like, what the fuck? You got an actual name like me?
Right?
So,
You see your teacher at Walmart for the first time and you're like, what? You took him out of the
yo,
school?
that shit is mind blowing, right?
It's
So
true.
yeah,
It's true.
yes, you want to be able to have that connection with your students, so because you can make a bigger impact in their life when they can level with you and just talk with you and be honest about whatever struggles they have. But
Hmm.
I think it's
Hmm.
also your responsibility to keep it in the realm of, mentor, mentee, sensei, student, like, and in
Right.
that reign, it's not your fucking business who I'm dating, or who I choose to have sex with, or how I choose. It's
Hmm.
not your business. You're a child. That's inappropriate. Go sit down.
Right.
So
So,
yeah,
yeah. And it's interesting because I think each of us can sort of pinpoint an experience in our lives where we got a response that seemed appropriate on this. So, like, I was a voracious reader as a kid, and I was reading well above my
Hey
grade
man, quit
level.
using college words. Go ahead.
I read a lot.
I
God
know it.
damn.
I know what it means,
Um,
but go ahead. I had to think for a second. I don't like thinking.
I found a book in the library and I checked it out, and it was probably, so I was in fourth grade, and I want to say it was like a 6.5 level. So it's like a sixth grade book. And I remember encountering a word that I didn't know what it meant. And I went to my teacher. So it was reading time. We all spent 15 minutes to read or whatever. And so I went to my teacher to ask what this word was, which was a common thing to do. So I remember I was like maybe second in line or something. And so that person walks away, and then it's my turn, and I ask him, like, this is the word, and I don't know what it means. And it was the first and only time that he didn't tell me. He told me, I think you should go home and
Mm,
ask your mom.
wow.
And the word was bosom. The word was bosom.
Mm,
So he wasn't going to tell me, like, it's the chest on a woman,
yeah.
he was like, you should probably take this home and ask your parents about this instead. And I do think that was appropriate, right? He looked at me, he's like, this is a fourth grader. This is probably, if she's asking me about this, there's probably a good chance she hasn't had any interaction with this kind of discussion before. Not my place, send it home.
Yeah.
And I remember being really frustrated. I was like, I can't, how is there a word that he doesn't know? This is stupid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't actually remember whether I took it home and I asked my mom or not, but I did eventually find out that bosom means breast. And
Yeah. Was that what you're getting
yeah,
at?
it was a scenario. Well, and it was a scenario that I didn't understand. Even after learning the word, I didn't understand what was happening in the book because I didn't understand that breasts had a sexual connotation to them. At
Mhm.
least not in that, in a fourth grade mind. I knew it had a connotation, this like weirdly kind of negative connotation,
Mhm.
but I didn't know that it was associated with sex.
Right.
Um, and so I
What?
do
Wait. What
remember.
kind of fucking book were you reading?
Well, so it was about a girl who her older sister did this thing. So
Okay. All right
yeah, so
then.
her older sister was trying to attract the farm boy, which sixth grade, I mean, you're talking that's somebody who's 11, 12 years old. So like they're beginning to recognize like this is somebody who would like read and be like, oh yeah, I have an older sister. And if I'm 11, there's a good chance that they're somewhere around 14, 15 years old,
There's a
right?
farm boy lurking.
And it's set in like those early 1900s, late 1800s, when 15 was about the time that you would get betrothed and married. So like it was accurate enough, but I do
Mm,
remember that that was an odd experience for me.
yeah.
But I mean, yeah, that's where it's just hard. We have to evaluate who our kids' teachers are and whether we trust them or not, and that's a difficult thing to decide.
That is deathly terrifying nowadays. That is,
Yeah,
yeah. I don't know. And once
yeah,
again, I don't even have any meat bags yet. So
yeah. So here's a different twist on this. We've been
hit
talking a
me.
lot about like child adult interactions.
Okay.
What happens when there's a child to child interaction
Uh,
that results in something questionable? So, like, for example, everybody's like 9 years old or whatever. And, like, in my scenario where I had a friend who needed to be taught these kind of things earlier because of trauma, like, this person has this understanding because of trauma,
yeah.
or maybe they know somebody who because of trauma has this understanding, and so they choose to try something that they learned about with like your kid. Like, what's the interaction there? What are we learning? What are we teaching? How are we protecting our kids from each other if we don't talk about sex? And to what degree do we talk about sex to protect them from those kind of interactions? Because it happens. I mean, there are some
Yeah, it definitely does.
perpetrators who start as young as middle school attacking their classmates.
Is attack the word we want to use?
Um, well, I mean, they're still children, so I hear that, but like, if you're 9 years old and the boy in class says, "Hey, I brought a candy bar. Do you want half of it?" And you go to the quiet place to have half of it, and then they do something to you. I mean, that's an attack, whether you.
Okay, fair point. Wow. Mm.
So is more. So I think where I'm coming from is like, is
I
more information more useful to them, or do we
yeah.
rely on that? Like we've taught you consent, and if you know consent, then you know this isn't what you want, kind of thing. Like,
Oh man, wow. Wow. Yeah. Shit. um
yeah, it's tough.
that is to say that one's hard is an understatement. That is a shit show in every way because once again, and like I think like we both mentioned, just like depends on the environment. Like what are kids teaching each other? Dude, I fuck. I would like to say hopefully in a case like that. Let's say you got a 7, 8, 9 year old who you've never really talked about sex to. You never had to. Is what it is.
Mm-hmm,
Um, I would hope that you and your kid have built a relationship to where they trust you enough and they feel comfortable enough coming home to you and telling you about any and everything that's happened to them that day at school.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I hope that as a parent, you are someone who's listened and you've built that level of trust and communication with them.
mm-hmm.
Because I think that is the only thing that's going to be the difference maker and the lifesaver in your kids' lives. Because if you helicopter parent them, you fuck them over. If you
Yep,
just throw them out into the wilderness, they're likely going to get fucked over.
yep,
And because there is no one size fits all, I think the only one size fits all is you as the parent having that kind of relationship to where your kid goes, "Hey, mom, me and Bobby, he brought like a Snickers. He was gonna give me half of it, and so we went to like the janitor's closet, and he gave me half of it. But then he also
mm-hmm,
touched me down there." Um,
mm-hmm.
eh,
It requires you to teach your kids that there are certain parts that are touchable and certain parts that aren't, right?
well, honestly, I forgot who mentioned it. It might have been. I don't want to say who it might have been because I don't want to be wrong. So I'll just say that I read or saw a video somewhere
Mm-hmm.
where they talked about kids naturally learn where they shouldn't be touched based on the fact that it's not touched. For example,
Yeah.
you'll grab a kid's arm, you'll pat him on the head, you'll smack him upside the head, you'll give him a kiss on the cheek or whatever, da 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 da. But
Mm-hmm.
unless it's like they're an infant and they need like a wipe down, you never touch them in that area.
Right.
So kids
Because it's not
learn naturally, oh, that's a private part. That area should not be touched.
right.
So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that I was ever sat down at some part and being like, your chest. No
Oh no,
protest.
me and my
Right?
folks
It's
never
not
had
like
the
somebody
birds.
did that.
I never had the birds and the bees come. I don't think any of my siblings ever had a birds and the
I
bees
don't
conversation. It
I
never
don't
fucking
think I did
happened.
either,
It never
to be
fucking
honest. I
happened.
mean,
I figured it out at
I
some point.
I do. I love my parents in that, but they really did just hand me a book. And it worked excellently for my older brother who wanted to read anyway. And so by being handed a book, it was this is how we know to communicate to you what's going on. And it was a book for boys. And so he read it and was like, hey, look, I learned some shit. And
Right.
magic ta like he had all the answers he wanted or needed. And so they just found the girl version and then gave it to me. And I really didn't get any more than that. I mean, I do know at one point my brother approached my dad to be like, let's talk about this.
Mhm.
Um, which like he has eventually come to have a different understanding of his sexuality than my dad has. So like I can understand how he would have gotten confused, like his base understanding as opposed to like what was in this book. Like it was definitely a monogamous, straight only kind of picture.
Mhm.
So like it wasn't like he got any kind of understanding that there was any other range of sexuality beside man, penis, woman, vagina.
Mhm.
Which by the way, that is like one far side for any of our listeners who are confused. That is one far side of a whole goddamn spectrum of feelings you can have sexually.
That is a
So
whole nother shit show.
shit. So like there are whoo, there's a lot there. Um, Whereas I don't know that I ever approached my mother about anything. And I do remember that the bit that was the most interesting in that book, and yes, it did discuss sex and B and the P and all that kind of stuff. The bit that was
The
the
V
most
and the
useful to
P.
me, and I did it backwards, whatever.
No, it's fine. I just my brain. Okay, go ahead.
Um, the part that was the most interesting was actually the chapter on boobs and like what the development of breasts was. Because
Because
here I
they're
had a body
amazing.
part
They're great.
like Titties are great.
Hey.
But I had a friend who developmentally, like, her body just did the things. And so,
Yeah.
I had a friend who had C-sized cups by the time she was at the end of 7th grade, and I hadn't even butted yet. I was still
Dude,
completely flat.
there was a
So, like,
girl when I was in 5th grade named Marie. 5th
don't call
fucking.
her out, baby. Don't do that to her.
I didn't give the last name.
She,
You got a fair point. I'm gonna. Oh God, do I edit that out or do I not?
no, you can just bloop it and it'll be fine. Put
Okay,
a bloop
fine.
on it.
I'll put a sound effect on it. Okay, so there was this
Twang.
girl. matter of fact, no. What I'm gonna use is that fucking ring of that spoon in your fucking cup. That's what I'm gonna use.
Sorry.
Anyway,
The chocolate keeps settling.
there was this
I'll take the
girl
spoon out.
whose name we shall not name. Who
Already
once
named
again
or
we
just
were in
editing it out. Oh, and for the Patreon listeners afterward, my murder live.
I'm glad you know. Anyway, who was it was 5th grade, and she had a set of grown woman like. I was like, yo, what is these things? I don't know what they is.
I
but
remember
I
the
like
guy
'em.
who had a full mustache. I remember the guy who had a full mustache by the end of 6th grade. I remember him.
Fucking weirdo. So
Like,
considering I can't
what
get one,
happens to men too? It's just that they don't get titties out of it.
hey man, look,
Poor girl.
we're not gonna talk about me and my growth, my life. Anyway, so but no, speaking of conversations, the only
Can you grow a
conversation.
mustache now?
I mean, like it doesn't fully connect, but I'll grow this here, and this thing right here has been the fucking same for a while, and it won't grow. All I wanted is to grow longer so I can do this shit with it, but it won't grow, so it's fine.
Just some
Anyway,
like beard oil in it, just like
I'm gonna try it and see if it works. I just want to go a little bit longer so I can be,
just
I
like
can be,
pull
I can be
gently on
Miss,
the hairs, like encouraging them, like you're pulling them out of the follicles
I
a
can
little
be
bit. Like,
Mr. Miyagi
ugh.
one day and just sit here and just do this shit one. Anyway,
I mean, with a non-connecting mustache, like you're getting there.
anyway. So I remember the only like birds and the bees conversation I ever had was with my mom, and her thing was, don't be common, y'all. Don't be common. Just don't be dipping your stick in everybody river. Like you're just common. You're just a pebble. I'm like, dang. Like so that's about the extent of my conversations, just not to be common.
Wait.
What?
Don't be dipping your stick. What was it? Don't be
dipping your stick in everybody river.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
That's some Angela advice right there.
It is. Wait, why you give my mama name out on the internet? So let me get this right. I can name Miss Cotton.
Because it's not her whole last name. You ain't gonna find her by tapping in.
I can name Miss Cotton. You can name my mama, but I can't say the other person's name.
Poor girl, it's not her fault.
It was
your mama. She chose to have you.
Actually, I was a Whoops baby. So
were you?
Yeah, I was a Whoops baby. Absolutely.
Well, then I take it back. You can edit out your mother's name.
Nah, it's fine. I'll leave it in. It's fine. Yeah. Nah. As I am, I don't know if she uses my name in her book, but I am specifically mentioned in her book she wrote. I'm gonna call her and ask her if my name is used in it, and then we'll go from there. Matter of fact, we might do that on the Patreon live. So
if it's in there, then you get to be like, "Well, fuck you, mama."
Yep. Your name's in my show now. You're welcome.
Woo! You on the record now, girl. That's funny. Yeah. That's funny.
Okay, so I think it's about time we taper this thing back in for the day.
This was a whole last conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I really thought we'd spread into other shit. I didn't think we'd talk about this.
Oh no, I knew us. I knew us. Well, also like if we remember, like just even the freedom conversation, we didn't get to go deep into anything. Like we sort of skated lightly across everything, sorta. And so on this one here, like I figured if we were gonna go down one path, that was going to be the path. And of course, there'll be
Yeah.
another episode where we get to talk about how do you talk about sex with your partners. Anyway,
I knew it. I knew it.
so
Is this
I'm
because I
sure.
called you out? Because I wasn't trying to call you out. I was just like, you do realize.
Girl, no. Because once again, this is us. Like we'll legit hit one topic, and then we'll go down that wormhole, and then the three other wormholes attached to that one, and then two other
Mm,
wormholes is attached to those other three. Like that's just what we do.
yeah.
Hashtag welcome to Let's Just Talk. If y'all knew how hard I am actively trying every day to keep us like on topic, because if we don't, it will turn into an episode where we go from sex to rainbows to unicorns to that dragon I saw flying across Phoenix the other day. Like it don't, nothing will
Look,
make
I've been
sense.
holding in the fact that it's raining outside. Okay, like I'm with
And
you.
then it'll turn to that too. Like if y'all knew, me and her both, we're making an active effort to
This is the
stay
detriment of friendship.
on fucking
Yeah.
topic.
This is the detriment of friendship. There's no need for a topic. There's no need. You
Honestly,
find
there
something,
really
you get
isn't.
started, and the next thing you know, I mean,
And
it's
just
it's how
yeah,
we
then
go,
it
so.
just turns into whatever
Well,
it is.
god damn, like 1/3 of this was just me talking about language learning. So like,
Point proven. And I like once again, and I was like, should I mention the kid and the dad? I want to mention it, but it's not on topic. But I'm gonna fucking mention it anyway. Like
doing it.
it's a
I'm
thing.
in. Yeah.
In for a penny, in for a pound. But anyway, so I guess I'll wrap this one up. So I think the ultimate thing is when it comes to having conversations with your kids, how old is enough or how young is too young. As once again, as Marissa said, we don't have any kids, so who the hell are we to give any advice? But I do think that the only difference maker, the only saving grace, is to be that parent or those parents who have established a trusting and loving and open relationship to where your kids genuinely feel and know and do come to you with whatever the fuck it is they're going through, with whatever it is that they've seen, because that will be the only way and the only time that you can give your kids the freedom to live life and be kids and learn and grow, but also protect them
Yeah.
and teach them the things that you want them to know or that they
Yeah.
need to know. Because once again, if you helicopter parent them, then you're doing them a disservice. If you throw them
Yeah.
to the wolves, you're doing them a disservice that way too. So you have to be that parent or those parents who their kids come to them with whatever they're seeing, whatever they go through.
Yeah.
That is how you talk about sex with your kids.
My best piece is be involved with your kids in such an extent that you know who they are, but
Mm,
at the same time, you get to watch them grow. Because if you're there for every second of every learning, of every growth, you're not going to see them change from day to day. But if you give them the space to learn who they are, but know that they know where home base is, where safe is, then you're going to get kids who come to you with stuff that needs addressed. You know, because it's an adult world with adult problems, and we bring kids into it. And
oh, that's a good one.
their capacity for handling that changes as they get older and as they go through their lives. And you know, when it's a baby, the only thing they can understand is that we take turns, but it doesn't take long for them to figure out who they want to touch and where and why. And you can build on that as they get older to teach them that relationships are about partnership and that they're, you know, not about physicality or whatever it is. That you can teach your kids as they get older these individual pieces about sex, about, you know, you have a healthy sex life. I mean, look at it. What is it that makes it
Hold.
healthy?
Our connection's getting a little unstable. Go ahead. That's fine.
Ooh, I
I'm
hate
sorry.
Wi-Fi.
I really didn't
Um,
want to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
no, it's okay. But if you have a healthy sexual relationship, take a second and look at it. And two, as fundamental as those pieces as turn taking, and go, okay, what of those pieces aren't inherently the action of sex, but are something that I can teach to my child, and then teach them. Take this bit. There's nothing wrong with teaching your kid how to be fair in a relationship. Does that benefit sex life later? Absolutely. Is that sex education? Tangentially. You know, let's provide our kids with the pieces of the puzzle before we just dump the whole thing on them.
Word. Cool. Well said, Marisa. Well, yeah.
You know, always is.
Whatever. Anyway, so that
Thanks for
concludes
coming in. Thanks for listening.
that concludes today's
Let us know what you
episode.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do the thing. Yeah, that's your part anyway. Actually, go ahead.
Especially our parents, please. Like we said, we're not parents. Please, if you're a parent and you're struggling with this, you know, maybe you want our perspective. We'll do a question and answer, but we will let you know that we are not qualified and you should probably speak to somebody who is. But we'll take your questions anyway, hazardous as it is. But let us know what you think. You know, if you're grandma and you got denied your hug by your 2.5-year-old grandchild, we want to
Tell
hear
me.
your rage.
Let me know.
Because
Yeah, let
that's
me
part of the
know. I'm on your
process, right?
side.
We want to hear about that. So email us at mnj@gmail.com. mnj, let's just talk at gmail.com.
Thank you. I was
right?
like, girl.
Which is little carrot top showing me where it's supposed to be anyway. That's also our Instagram, mnj, let's just talk. So please let us hear from you. We want to know where you're at. Seriously, because especially our parents, what are you doing, especially your kids who are real young? What are you doing that feel like you're going to benefit their sex education as they get older? And if you're holding off on some of that stuff, let us know why. There's absolutely stuff we haven't considered so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you said let us know why. Because I was gonna say if you haven't, you might want to get on that shit because chances are the world's already done it. Wow, that's really fucking dark. That
That's a
being
little
said, I'm
right
sorry.
past my test. That's good news. Yay. I can't pick that up for you. You just were like, let's put it in the toilet and like
Well, once again, as I am the dark-skinned one, I'm also the dark soul. So anyway,
no,
uh,
I don't allow it. I don't allow it. That's not reasoning enough. That's just coincidence.
so in the meantime, between time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Much love. Please communicate with
We'll
your
talk
kids.
to you next time. Talk
And
to your
we
kids.
out.
Bye.